Okay, so for all of you out there prepping for UPSC, especially keeping up with those Daily Main's current affairs, um, we are diving into like a really crucial moment here. This 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and India. And this isn't just like a history lesson. This is about like really understanding the forces shaping Asia and, how everything's kind of interconnected in the world. It's like exactly the kind of analysis that could give you an edge in both your mains and maybe even prelims.
Absolutely. And to kind of get into all of that, we've, really focused in on some key insights from a recent article in the Hindu Humanity, a resource that I'm sure you're all familiar with.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the idea is to kind of cut through all the noise and really get down to the core of, this complex relationship between China and India, and especially now at this, important 75th anniversary, and, really save you some of that precious study time while making sure you're totally in the know.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, we're going to be covering like all the major aspects, like leadership decisions, starting from way back with Nehru and Mao all the way to Modi and Xi and how they've kind of shaped things. And then we'll get into something that's often overlooked, the whole strength of cultural and economic ties, and then we'll look at the mechanisms these two countries have actually come up with to manage their differences, which is, really important. And finally, we'll think about their shared responsibilities on the global stage and where things might be headed. This is like all structured in a way to give you a solid overview and those key perspectives that are super crucial for your UPSC prep.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's dive right in with leadership. The article really highlights how the individuals in charge have, really steered this relationship for the past 75 years.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to consider is the direct and lasting impact of those initial interactions. When they first established diplomatic ties back in 1950 with Mao Zedong and Nehru, it wasn't just like some formality. It actually set a tone, a foundation that later leaders, either built upon or sometimes even pushed back against.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that foundation definitely faced its challenges early on, but then you see these efforts to reset things,
Yeah.
Like when Rajiv Gandhi visited China in 1988, that felt like a real turning point, like a conscious decision to move in a new direction.
Oh, yeah, a crucial recalibration.
Yeah.
It's signaling that they were willing to look past some of the complexities from the past. And, you fast forward to more recent times, those interactions between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, including their informal summits, they show that this effort to, kind of guide the relationship at that high level is ongoing.
Yeah, their meeting in Kazan is just the latest example of that continued dialogue right at the top,
Right.
and it really shows how important it is for leaders to be actively involved, especially when dealing with things like border disputes or economic disagreements. It really underscores the importance of diplomacy at the highest level to keep things stable, even when there's a lot of complexity below the surface.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's shift gears a bit and focus on something that might surprise some people, the depth of the cultural and economic connections. The article paints this picture that goes way beyond just political interactions.
Absolutely. These cultural and economic threads are a major part of the relationship, and they're often really resilient. Those historical links are deep. They go back centuries.
Yes, centuries.
Think about the ancient exchanges that happened because of Buddhism, the travels of scholars like Master Xuanzang, the spread of ideas through people like Bodhidharma. These aren't just stories from the past. They show these deep, long-lasting connections.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about those connections that go back so far. And then in more modern times, you see those connections play out with people like Rabindranath Tagore and Dr. Katniss, who become symbols of this, cross-cultural friendship. It's a powerful reminder of the people-to-people bonds that have really endured.
Yeah, and when you look at the economic side, the sheer amount of growth is remarkable. The article points out this surge in trade from under $3 billion in 2000 to a massive $138.5 billion in 2024. That's a huge amount of exchange. And it shows how interdependent these economies are, regardless of any political tensions.
Wow, that's an incredible jump. And it really makes you think about the economic realities at work. And it's not just about trading goods, right? There's also the increasing cultural exchange happening now.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The popularity of Bollywood films in China, people doing yoga all over India. These create connections on a different level, maybe one that's not as politically charged.
For sure. And things like the direct flights.
Yeah.
Starting up again, the easing of visa processes, as the article highlights. These are real, tangible signs of that ongoing engagement. But, and this is really important for understanding this from a UPSC perspective, the article also stresses that there's this big imbalance in the economic relationship with China consistently having a large trade surplus.
Right.
And that imbalance is a key factor to consider when analyzing the overall, health and stability of these economic ties.
Absolutely. That trade imbalance is a major point of discussion and, a potential source of friction. And given the size and proximity of these two nations, disagreements are bound to happen. So the article really digs into how China and India have historically dealt with these differences.
Yeah, and what really stands out is their constant preference for dialogue and diplomatic solutions, things like setting up the special representative mechanism, which was designed for high-level political negotiations on that complex border issue, and then the working mechanism for consultation and coordination on India-China border affairs.
Yeah.
Both of these highlight their commitment to finding peaceful resolutions.
So even with those persistent border disputes, including the recent tensions in Ladakh, there's been this underlying commitment to using diplomatic channels. And the article makes it clear that while these issues are a big challenge, both sides have generally prioritized de-escalation and peaceful conflict resolution.
Exactly. The idea has often been to prevent these specific disagreements, even big ones like the border, from totally derailing the whole relationship, and preventing cooperation in other areas. It's a tough balancing act, but it's crucial to how they've managed this relationship.
It's a real tightrope walk for sure. Now, looking beyond their interactions with each other, the article also looks at China and India's roles on the global stage, and this feels especially relevant in today's complex geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, both China and India have historically presented themselves as advocates for developing nations. Think about their early and prominent role in pushing for those 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which emphasize things like respecting each other's territory and sovereignty, non-aggression, not interfering in each other's internal affairs, equality, mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. It really shows their shared vision for a more equitable international order back then.
Right, and that historical alignment is still evident today through their participation in major global organizations like BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SKO, and the G20.
Yeah.
They often end up advocating for similar reforms and a world with multiple centers of power,
Yeah, and what's especially noteworthy is the potential for their combined influence within these multilateral frameworks. The article mentions President Xi's statement that when China and India speak with one voice, the world listens. And in a global context where geopolitical tensions are rising and there's economic uncertainty, their ability to cooperate on things like multilateralism, climate change, global governance carries a lot of weight, especially for the nations of the Global South.
It really raises this important question, doesn't it? How effectively can they use these shared platforms to achieve their common goals and contribute to a more stable world order? Now, let's look ahead. What does the Hindu article suggest as potential directions for this relationship going forward?
Well, the article really emphasizes that both countries need to continue upholding mutual respect and prevent that long-standing border dispute from becoming the only thing that defines their relationship. Developing a long-term vision focused on peace, stability, and mutual understanding is presented as essential for progress.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to imagine a truly strong and cooperative relationship if there's always this underlying tension dominating the conversation. The article also touches upon the importance of increasing economic and developmental cooperation in the years to come, right?
Exactly. And this is where the potential alignment of their national development visions becomes really interesting. China's focus on achieving high-quality development and India's ambitious Viksit Bharat 2047 vision. The idea is that by strategically aligning their development paths and promoting fairer and more balanced trade practices, they could unlock huge economic benefits for both sides. The article even suggests the possibility of a renewed focus on large-scale trade investment and technology collaboration.
So it's about finding and nurturing those areas where their individual national goals actually complement and reinforce each other. And then in terms of their global involvement, the article reiterates the importance of strengthening their coordination and collaboration within these international organizations, right?
Absolutely. As influential voices representing a large portion of the Global South, closer collaboration within the SCUPO and BRICS and other multilateral forums could play a vital role in shaping a more equitable and representative global order. The article suggests that such cooperation could potentially lead to a new era of greater global stability and inclusive development.
So just to recap all of that for you, our listeners who are hard at work preparing for your UPSC exams, we've explored the significant impact of leadership over the past 75 years from Nehru and Mao to Modi and Xi. We've highlighted those vital and often overlooked cultural and economic exchanges, remembering that bilateral trade has skyrocketed from under $3 billion to an impressive $138.5 billion. We've looked at those established mechanisms for managing the differences, like that crucial special representative mechanism, even when facing ongoing challenges like the situation in Ladakh and those continued de-escalation efforts. And we've highlighted their shared global responsibilities within key organizations like BRICS and the SEO, emphasizing that despite existing tensions, both nations consistently choose dialogue as their way of engaging with each other.
And as we look to the future, that potential alignment between China's pursuit of high-quality development and India's Viksit Bharat 2047 presents some really promising avenues for increased economic cooperation. Ultimately, the article makes it clear that mutual respect and a commitment to a peaceful resolution of the border issue are paramount, and that their collaborative leadership on the world stage has the potential to contribute to a fairer and more just international system. These are the key takeaways for you to consider as you develop your understanding of India's foreign policy.
So here's a final thought for you to really ponder as you continue your UPSC preparation, given these deep historical connections and the significant economic interdependence. What concrete steps beyond just those high-level diplomatic talks could actually transform the China-India relationship into a more consistently stable and genuinely cooperative partnership in the long term? Think about that in the context of their distinct national ambitions and their shared responsibilities in shaping the future of our world, you know?
It's a crucial question to think about as you continue your studies, and for our listeners as you delve deeper into this important topic. Remember that the main source for this discussion has been The Hindu, a cornerstone resource for your UPSC preparation.
For sure. We really hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, more structured, and insightful understanding of this incredibly important bilateral relationship as you continue your UPSC journey. And if you found this analysis helpful for your preparation, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment with any questions you might have. You know, we're always looking to explore the topics that are most relevant and beneficial for your studies. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, see you next time.